This is the first part of our makeup effects series for indie filmmakers or beginner makeup effects artists. We're going to teach you today how to do prosthetic transfers. Some people like to use derma waxes and nose putties and things for their wounds, but as you find, they don't last. They're very sticky. They melt easy, like if you're sweating in a movie set. So we're going to teach you today how to do something that's a little more stable when you're on the set. These are called prosthetic transfers. And we're going to do some really basic ones today. First of all, I'm going to start off with a bullet hole. You're going to take small pieces of clay. This is oil-based clay. It's called NSP from Chavant. You're going to take a little bit of it. We're going to make a bullet hole first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bullet hole. I'm going to do a gash. I'm going to do a gash, and then we're going to do maybe a scar or something here too. We're going to be doing silicone prosthetic transfers, which is standard in the industry right now. We're also going to do some gelatin prosthetic transfers and even some liquid latex prosthetic transfers for those that are using latex in their kits. Okay, first of all, the bullet hole, a little bit of clay. When you do makeup effects, you're trying to create an illusion that there's something there that's not. So what we're going to create here is a wound or a bullet hole. If you notice, I took that little ball and I pressed it down, made a little tiny bump. You don't want a tall bump because if it's too tall, it's just going to look like a crater on the person's face and not really a bullet hole. You want it to be as flush to the skin as possible. Just to show you how flush it is to the table, I put a popsicle stick next to it. That's how high it is. It's not very high at all. A little higher than a popsicle stick. I'm smoothing out the edges really nice. That will be how tall your bullet hole will be. So after you smoothed out the edges, now you're going to take a little bit of Vaseline. You take that little bit of Vaseline and smooth out that bullet hole bump. It's still a bump, but I'm just taking away all my fingerprints and marks from my tools. Once you do that, you want to take a tool. I took a popsicle stick and I just cut a piece out of it so I can use it as a tool. You can use regular dental tools if you want, but right now this is what I'm going to use for you guys. For a bullet hole, you got to think about the size of the bullet. You know, is this a 45, a 9mm, a 22? You know, you have to think about that. And I dug a hole in it. Now what you need to do is this big bump that's sticking up, if you want to make it into an exit wound, you want to make it a little bit sloppy. Shred the edges a little bit, like that. So now I made this into an exit wound. The next one I make is going to be an entrance wound, so it's not going to be as high. Okay, let's just leave it right there for right now. Let's do another one. This will be an entrance wound for the same bullet. Okay, little ball of clay. I'm going to put it down. You want to keep it a little bit away from the other one because we need to have a separation of the molds. Smear it down like I said before. It's a small mound still. Smear it out. I'll take my tool and I'll kind of get some of this away because I don't want it going too far away. A little bit of Vaseline. Make it nice and clean and smooth. Take your tool. Now you're going to cut another hole in this. Dig a hole out. Okay. Now we're going to take away most of that. Smear it away. Repair it. Blend it down. It can have a little bit of a lip, but not too much. Like that. And I'll show you how to fix this up a little more. So that is your bullet hole. Very small indentation hole. Now the little tiny piece of clay you had left over, drop it in the center there. What we're going to do is make it look a little meaty inside there. So you kind of touch it to the edges, and then you kind of churn it up a little bit with your tool so it looks kind of bumpy inside, because there's meat inside there. The other one, same thing. Take a little bit of clay, drop it in the center there, and make it a little bit meaty too. If you still have, you know, the counter or whatever you're using underneath it showing, that's okay if it's in little tiny pieces, but you want to just make it real meaty inside there. Now I'm kind of digging out around the edges a little bit because I want to have some depth to this exit wound here. I know this looks a little rough on the outside. We're going to fix that in a minute. Okay, same with this one. Just want to give it a little bit of depth. Okay, now we're going to take something else. You can use alcohol if you want. I have this. It's called Naphtha. I have it in this bottle here. I'm going to take a brush and I'm going to soften these edges a little bit around this one. Just a little bit. Because I want it to look disturbed. You know, I want the tissue to look damaged, but I don't want it to look like clay. Okay? And that one just needs to be smooth. Now, I want you to think about how to add texture to this. I have a Ziploc bag here. You can see the ends on it. I have a Ziploc bag, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it over it. I'm going to take a toothpick, and what I sometimes do with the toothpick is I'll just break the tip off just a little bit, just so it's not as sharp. You can do it sharper if you want, but I like to do it a little bit thinner like that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to lightly poke pores into this. And you want to fill the whole surface with pores. Not inside, but just the skin surface on the outside. And as I poke these holes in, just lightly, just little teeny pore holes. And if it's on a forehead, you might want to have some lines, you know, on it. Might want to have some lines on it. And if you peel it off, you notice it has some nice light pores in it. Now, we're going to do the same thing to the other one. Take your toothpick, and you can never have enough pores. If you look at your skin on your face, there's a pore next to a pore. Sometimes bullet hole exit wounds look worse than this. They're very meaty looking and chewed up. But we're just going to try and keep this one a little bit simpler. You can actually, I'm even thinking about making this a little bit bigger, because exit holes are often bigger, because after that bullet pushes through your head, it takes other things out with it when it leaves, like bone fragments and brain tissues and stuff. So you want it a little bit bigger. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to take my naphtha again a little bit, kind of soften that out. Just a little bit. Okay. Okay, there's my bullet holes, my exit wound and my entrance wound. Now we're going to do a cut right next to it here. We're going to take a piece of clay, roll it out, and we're going to do basically the same thing we did with the bullet hole, except we're going to make a longer gash. So press it down a little bit so it sticks to the table, and then you're going to blend the sides down, just like this. And it is a little tall, at least for me. I'm going to take my popsicle stick and I'm going to smooth it out a little bit. Okay? And remember I said about the edges? You need to flush it right to that surface you're sculpting on. Taking more off top. It seems a little tall. I'm comparing it to the bullet hole, this one. I want to make it about as tall as that, so I'm taking off some of the top surface because it's just still a little too tall for me. Remember I said you want to create an illusion that this wound is actually inside the skin, not sitting on top of it. That's what a lot of beginner effects artists have a problem with, is that they make their wounds and stuff too tall. You want to keep it as low to the skin surface as you can so it looks real. Alright, that's pretty good. Now I'm going to take some Vaseline again. I'm going to take away all my sculpting lines. As you can see, it's nice and low. It's even shorter than the exit wound, but about the same height as the regular bullet hole. Nice and shallow. That's the beginning of our wound. Now let's create the gash in this wound. I'm going to take my toothpick, and I kind of know what I already want to do. So that's what you always want to plan, is what are you going to do? What kind of wound is it? You know, is it a knife wound? Is it a gash from hitting a rock? You know, you have to think about that when you make the wound. Mine's going to be just a nice gash from probably getting hit with something like a stick, or so it's kind of irregular. Usually the edges are tipped out so they don't have a blunt, but sometimes they will be blunt. Okay, I dug it out a little bit. You can see that it also raised the edges a little bit, which I don't mind. I might bring them down a little bit. The easy way to bring it down is to take your finger like this, just knock the edge down. You can leave the edge up if you want it a little more dramatic. I'm going to take my toothpick, the sharp part, and I'm just going to kind of make it look a little chewy. Like that. And then if you want, you can actually even fill this gash with clay like we did with these and make it a little meaty inside. And there's also fat layer right next to the surface of the skin. So when you paint this, you might want to put a little bit of yellow in there. If it's a really big gaping wound, you're going to see more fat. But something this small, you're not. Plus you're going to give it a little bit of blood, so that will cover up a lot of the fat. I took a little bit of the clay that I had left over and I pushed it inside there because I want to make it a little meaty in there. You know, I want to make it look not flat from the counter surface you're sculpting on. I want a little meaty in there. There is your wound. Alright, now we're going to create a scar. I did the same thing as I did for this one. I rolled out a piece of clay. You have to think about what kind of scar you're going to make, because people have different types of scars. Some are higher, some are kind of flush, some are real irregular, depending on how they healed, if they had stitches or not. If they just let it heal itself, it's not going to be as nice looking, which is, they're cool looking scars out there. So I'm doing the same thing, except this time I'm going to leave it a little high. I'm not going to change the height too much. Mine, I want this one to be pretty large. Okay, take my Vaseline now. I'm going to rub it out just a little bit because I want to leave some of the irregularities. I'll even add a little more to it. This scar I'm going to do some interesting swervy lines like this. I just want to make it look a little unique. And then I'm going to take my Naphtha. What I like about Naphtha is that it actually dissolves the clay a little bit, and it makes it look kind of cool. I really like how Naphtha works for it. You can use alcohol if you want, it just doesn't dissolve it as fast. I'm taking those little lines that I did and I'm leaving them in, but I'm just softening them up so they look a little more natural. I added a little more depth to those lines. Now I'm going to push them away with this Naphtha. Dissolve it in a little bit. And there's no real rule to scars, except, you know, you don't want it looking like it's artificial. You want it to look like the skin just healed that way. See how it smooths it out really nice? And the more lines you make in it, the more unique it starts to look. A little more Naphtha, and I'm going to push those away too. And this scar here is going to look really cool because it's going to look really unique. And no two scars are the same, as we know. Now I'm going to clean a little bit of this gooky stuff away. Try not to touch your sculpture. Just taking Naphtha on my brush and just kind of cleaning it up a little bit. See how easy that scar was to make? See, you can do your characters in your films can have some really cool, unique looks to them, depending on what you want to do. Okay, I took some clay, I made a nice long line. What we're going to do next is we're going to make a small wall around all these things. That wall is actually going to be in your mold, it'll be a little indentation. And that's kind of for overflow of your material you use for casting it. I'm going to take just some hard object, I'm going to kind of flatten it out a little bit. And now I'm going to actually trim it so it looks kind of clean. So I lift it up, laid it back down, and I'm going to trim it with another tool. The reason why I'm trimming is just because I want my molds to look pretty. Clay, so it's a nice clean edge on both sides. I'm going to take my clay now. I'm going to start making walls around my sculptures. What I'm doing with these walls will make more sense later on when you see what they're used for. They will actually be overflow areas for your material when you're casting it. So I'm trying to leave about, I don't know, inch and a half distance. Now I'm just going to kind of fill in the little gaps so that they're all even and smooth. If you don't want to do this, if you just want to build a mold around it and pour it, you can. But when you watch the rest of this video, you'll understand why I'm doing this. And you'll see that it really helps to make your edges feathered better and separate out your pieces so there's not a lot of thick edges. One thing I realized I didn't do was I didn't put any texture on my cut. So I'm going to take a Ziploc bag again. I split it in half, as you can see, and I'm laying it on top. And now I'm going to add my little pour holes. Now we are ready for casting. Okay, to create a wall, roll out your clay. This clay is Van Aken Clay. I use it for my mostly walls. It's a really good clay. And if you're a beginning sculptor, it's a good clay to use for your sculptures too, if you like it. Some people like it. It's a very soft clay. What I'm doing now is I'm rolling it flat. I have my own rolling pin here that I use. It's not for food. It's only for clay. And you take your knife. Now I use this clay around my sculpture. And I give it about maybe an inch and a half or so distance from the sculpture. Like about that. Maybe a little less. Now to hold the clay down, I'm just going to pinch the edges here. Pinching the edges down sticks it to the table so none of your molding material will leak out the bottom.